Welcome to this brief e-nugget on adaptive leadership principles in terms of creating authentic leadership. And I want to lead you through the 7 principles which have been adopted through the work of Professor Ron Heifetz. So the first principle is to get on the balcony. And what Heifetz says is you need to be looking beyond the organisation, to look across the horizon, to actually scan the external environment, the politics, the economics, the social aspects, technical developments, legal aspects, and environmental, what we would call the Estelle toolbox, which I've talked about in the earlier sections. So get up on that balcony and having a good look, scanning the horizon to see what the organisation is actually going to be dealing with over the course of its future. What he then argues is there is a need to get this sense of that bigger picture, but then move between the balcony and the dance floor. What he says is up on the balcony, you can get a much richer picture of the patterns that emerge below you. But when you get down to the dance floor, you can actually see the detail. So what he argues is to move between the balcony and the dance floor, is to protect those voices from below so that individuals feel that they're listened to and that you can add to the wholeness of that range of solutions. So they are part of dealing with the adaptive leadership challenge once that's been identified, and bring their skills to the fore in making an impact on that. So the next stage, and I've just touched on that, is to determine whether the challenge that you're facing is an adaptive challenge rather than a technical problem. An adaptive challenge, there's no real solutions available. You can't just look for one. You've actually got to work with other people and design it. And the aspect of that as well is that with an adaptive challenge, the solution to that challenge is beyond the remit of an individual organisation. So the second principle is to identify the challenge that you are facing. And then we look at the holding environment, principle 3, and it draws together principles 4 through to 6. Now, this holding environment, it can be a physical space, or in today's world, in the post-pandemic paradigm, it's very much about a virtual space as well, made up of relationships where people work together, where they talk together, where they engage together, where they deal with conflict together. You create this holding environment. And it's something that I'm very strong on in terms of applied leadership challenges based on the principles of action learning, bringing people together to learn about the challenges that each of them face and to act in a peer consultancy way to actually come up with some suggested solutions and designs for that. So principle 3 is about creating that safe holding environment. And part of that is to deal with conflict. And Heifetz calls this orchestrating conflict. It's like having that orchestra. You are there orchestrating it, and you will have people with different views, different ideas, different suggestions, and potentially different solutions. And your role as a leader is not to ignore them, but is to bring that conflict to the fore. And he talks about hooking that conflict. And you might see here the illustration that I've got is the proverbial pressure cooker. And if perhaps a little bit outdated now, but if you turn the pressure up just enough that the food boils and the food cooks, that's great. But let it boil too much and it boils over and comes over all of us. The same with conflict. So regulate that heat, regulate the conflicts, keep it at a level that's manageable. And one of the things that Heifetz talked about, and I totally agree with this, and I've certainly picked up on this from my own many years of experience, is that conflict can be positive because it actually tunes people to the issues that are on the table. So that's principle 4. Within that holding environment is to cook that conflict. And whilst we're doing that, as that conflict develops, and there will be conflict in most situations when you're dealing with strategic leadership challenges, it's then about bringing in this disciplined attention, and it's keeping people focused on the job in hand, having them present there, present in the moment, present in the mind, and present in what it is they are seeking to achieve as part of the problem-solving approach. And then you get to a position where as the leader or the leadership, you've developed that potential conflict. You've brought it into areas where the weaknesses have become strengths. You've looked at the threats, and as a group, you've developed those into opportunities, and you're now in a position to take that forward and actually try something different. And this is where you give the work back to the people who can resolve the challenge, but they can do it at a pace at which they can deal with it. So that is the sixth principle of Heifetz's work. And so just to recap, we start off by getting on that balcony, getting that bigger picture, and it's a bit like the classic MBOs, management by objectives, when they talked about management by walking about. Of course, I prefer to talk about leadership by walking about, but it's getting between that balcony and the dance floor so that you can see that bigger picture, but you can also keep in touch with the detail and the challenges that people are facing. Once you've done that, and together in a collective sense, you then identify the adaptive challenge. You know what it is you're facing. It's not just a problem, it's a challenge. And that challenge requires people, it requires relationships, and you develop that through this holding environment where you bring the conflict together, you deal with people's strengths in responding to conflict and understand those who find it more difficult. You then bring in that disciplined attention, keep everybody present in the moment and on the tasks that are required. Get it to a point at which you can hand it back to the people who can make a difference on the ground, and then you keep going between that balcony and the dance floor to see that it's working. So I hope that's been a useful illustration of the adaptive leadership principles, and the only way in which this is going to work, and this is my real takeaway here, is whatever you do, it's got to be authentic. You've got to say what you mean and mean what you say. Thank you.